Thanks, guys. I'll be talking about building blockchain applications with JavaScript. My name is Sam Abbassi, and I am a technical evangelist with Algorand. Let's make sure it works. Great. So before we get started, if you scan this QR or go to this URL, there's a survey, which is just your name and email. If you do that, I'll send you, that's a form. I'll send you a survey afterwards. Complete the survey, and you'll be thrown into a raffle for prizes. 3 winners, and the prizes will be either a Raspberry 4 or a YubiKey. Okay, so I want to start by cutting through the fluff of what you may have heard about blockchains and what blockchains are. So blockchain is just a database. There are different ways to maintain the database, right? There's 2,000 cryptocurrencies out there, and each kind of have their own way of maintaining that database. Some differ drastically from others. Others are incredibly similar, and some are basically identical with different externalities that affect how that maintenance happens. So database maintenance in blockchain just means maintaining a distributed ledger of records. And those records are transactions. And there are different transaction constructions, so there are different ways to maintain those transactions. But, drum roll, I think there's one more. There are several problems, right? It's a big caveat. One being the speed of transaction confirmations, as well as the security of those transactions. Or said in another way, the integrity of those transactions that have been confirmed and those that will be confirmed. So really, it's about how fast and how secure is your database. Algorand uses something called VRFs, verifiable random functions, and they're very similar to ZK snarks, which is basically just a way to prove something to someone without actually revealing the thing itself. So this is based off research done by Silvio Macaulay, who is our founder, MIT computer scientist. The cliche example is trying to gain admission to a club or a bar and letting the bouncer know that you're 18 or 21, depending on your jurisdiction, without actually showing your date of birth, right? So the way we use this, we use the VRF mechanism and this concept as a cryptographic lottery in our selection process and in our writing to the database process. So this makes transaction verification very fast, and it makes it mathematically tamper-proof as well. So great. You may be saying, okay, this information is fine, but how can I use this as a developer? Like, where's the advantage for me? So that's where we focus a lot of our attention. And we have 4 different SDKs in Go, Java, JavaScript, and Python. So you can see all this information at developer.algorand.org. Here you can see some examples of some JS standalone functions. In red, I have circled our REST paths for what are called algo D and KMD. You can read about that on your own time. And here's an example in JS for a transaction construction, right? So you have different fields here, from, to, a fee. If you're familiar with blockchain, this should look similar, as well as first round, last round, when your transaction is valid, for what block range within the blockchain, as well as information about the network with Genesis ID and your Genesis hash. So here's an example of signing the transaction. In this case, it's called logic sig, which is our way of creating and handling smart contracts. And then here we are submitting that transaction to the network as well. Or you can do really interesting things like define an asset. So you have parameters like total issuance, name of the asset, along with some optional metadata like URL or some hash commitment. So you can define as well some user privileges. In this case, we have manager, reserve, freeze, and clawback addresses. These are basically access controls over your asset. So designating who can transact the asset, freezing the asset itself, and all kinds of constructions like that. So here we are generating the asset itself, and this should look familiar because it's similar to how we construct a transaction. And again, same thing. We are signing the transaction and sending the transaction or broadcasting the transaction to the network. So here is an example of a React component. I think I have to play this. Yeah, so here's a React component of sending a transaction. You designate what address you want to send it to, an amount, some note field. You can write a kilobyte of data into what's called the note field in a transaction object. Send that to the network, which will give you a transaction ID. And then if you're familiar with blockchain, this is just a block explorer. You can select what network you want to be a part of. look up your transaction ID, and there's all your information about the transaction, and in this case, alongside the human-readable notes field that's designated there. So let me go back to this. So in conclusion, Algorand is what's called a next-generation blockchain. It's built from first principles, some that we've designed and built ourselves, and we want to make it as easy as possible for people to build on. So we're focusing a lot on JavaScript as one of the most popular development languages, if not the most popular development language. So we're throwing a ton of resources and making that a reality. If you have any questions, this is my email, sam@algorand.com. Our dev docs, again, are at developer.algorand.org. And there's also a great forum as well. If you have any questions, you can post questions there.